We thought the human would break the moment we touched her. Instead, the real breaking started when she finally smiled at us. Look, I had been teaching combat techniques for 17 cycles at the Galactic Combat Academy, and I thought I had seen everything. Everything. My name is Velkrin, and before you ask, yes, I am a Threxian, which means I stand roughly 9 feet tall, have 4 arms, and possess what the other species politely call an imposing presence. What they really mean is that I look like I could break most sentient beings in half without breaking a sweat. They would be correct. Station Corvallis floated in the neutral zone between 6 different star systems, a massive rotating wheel of metal and ambition where the galaxy's best and brightest came to learn how not to die in combat. The Academy occupied the entire northern section, 15 levels of training halls, simulation chambers, and medical bays that saw far too much use. We trained everyone here, Valorians with their crystalline exoskeletons, Morphean shadow steppers who could phase through solid matter, Cauldron berserkers who made my species look downright cuddly. The place hummed with violence, controlled and sanctioned, but violence nonetheless.
I loved it.
My third period advanced combat class had just cleared out, leaving the main training hall smelling of ozone and fear, which was pretty much standard. The simulation generators were cooling down, making that clicking ticking sound they always made, like some mechanical insect trying to communicate. I was reviewing the day's performance scores on my datapad when Instructor Quelix slithered in, her serpentine body moving in that unsettling way that still made my stomach turn even after 5 years of working together. Velkrin, she hissed, her translator chip rendering her speech in flat, emotionless tones that somehow made everything she said sound vaguely threatening. Have you reviewed the new intake files? I glanced at them. I said, not looking up from my pad. Looks standard. Couple of Drexian nobles who think their family names will protect them from getting their tails handed to them. A Quelbian transfer student who apparently set some kind of speed record at the Southern Academy. Why? Quelix's eyes, all 4 of them, blinked in sequence. We are getting a human. I finally looked up. A human? As in from Earth? Is there another species called human that I am unaware of? Her sarcasm translator must have been working overtime. Yes. From Earth. Exchange program. Administrator Horth approved it personally. Speaking of Horth, the station's administrator chose that exact moment to waddle into the training hall, his bulbous Porphylian body jiggling with each step. Horth was a politician first, an educator somewhere around 5th or 6th, and he had all the combat capability of a particularly soft cushion. But he controlled the budgets, so we all pretended to respect him. Velkrin. Quelix. Wonderful. He wheezed, his breathing apparatus struggling with the exertion of walking 20 meters. I trust Quelix has informed you about our exciting new student. She mentioned it, I said carefully. A human. That is unusual. Unusual? It is historic. Horth's face sacks inflated with pride. We are the first combat academy to accept a human student. Think of the prestige. Think of the diplomatic relations. Think of the funding. There it was. Always about the credits with Horth. Think of the liability. Quelix muttered, barely audible. What was that? Horth's hearing was apparently better than his physical fitness suggested. I said, think of the opportunity, Quelix corrected smoothly, to assess a species we know very little about in combat situations. That much was true. Humans were relative newcomers to galactic civilization, only making contact about 30 cycles ago. They were from some unremarkable yellow star system on the outer rim, had barely developed faster than light travel, and from what little I had heard, they were soft, slow, and ridiculously fragile. Their planet was classified as some kind of garden world, all pleasant temperatures and abundant resources. They had never had to fight for anything. When does this human arrive? I asked, already dreading the paperwork involved in inevitable medical emergencies. Tomorrow morning, Horth said cheerfully. I trust you will make her feel welcome, Velkrin. Perhaps a small demonstration. Show her what real combat looks like. Quelix and I exchanged glances. A demonstration.
Right.
What Horth really meant was, scare the newcomer, establish dominance, make sure she understands the hierarchy. It was standard procedure for new students, especially ones from species we had not dealt with before. A little intimidation went a long way toward preventing problems later. Of course, Administrator, I said, my mandibles clicking in what passed for a Threxian smile. I will prepare something appropriate. Excellent, excellent. Orth turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Velkrin. Try not to break her too badly. The diplomatic incident would be terribly inconvenient. He waddled away, leaving Quelix and I alone in the training hall. A human, I said, shaking my head. This should be entertaining. Or a complete disaster, Quelix added. Is there a difference? I asked. We both laughed, the sound echoing off the metal walls. Neither of us had any idea, not even the slightest clue how wrong we were about to be. She arrived on the morning transport, and honestly, my first thought was that someone had made a mistake. A clerical error. Maybe we were supposed to receive a human diplomat's pet, not an actual student. Ria Chen stood maybe 5.5 feet tall, which made her absolutely tiny by galactic standards. She had dark hair pulled back in some kind of functional knot, brown eyes that seemed too large for her small face, and skin that looked like it would tear if you breathed on it. Wrong. She wore the standard academy jumpsuit, which hung on her frame like it was 3 sizes too big. No natural armor, no visible weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom sacs, nothing. She looked like something's lunch, not something that could fight. That is a human. Quelix whispered beside me as we watched Ria complete her intake processing at the administration desk. That creature conquered a planet? Apparently they are a social species, I said, reading from the brief file Horth had provided. They use tools and technology to compensate for their physical weaknesses. Highly intelligent, supposedly. Intelligence does not stop a blade, Quelix observed. Ria finished with the administration drone and turned toward us, her scanning device clearly having identified us as her assigned instructors. She walked over with a strange bouncing gait that looked inefficient and wasteful. Humans apparently had only 2 legs. 2. How did they even maintain balance? Instructors Velkrin and Quelix? Her voice was higher pitched than I expected, and her translator rendered the words with an odd rhythm. I am Ria Chen, reporting for combat training. We can see that, I said, looking down at her from my considerable height advantage. Tell me, Ria Chen, have you had any combat training on your world? Some, she said simply. Her face did not show much expression, which made reading her difficult. Basic military training, hand-to-hand fundamentals, tactical assessment courses. Basic training, Quelix repeated, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. How nice. I decided to cut to the point. Here at the Academy we have a tradition for new students, a demonstration bout. It helps us assess your current skill level and, shall we say, understand your place in the hierarchy. You want to fight me, Ria said. It was not a question. Not me personally, I said, gesturing toward the training hall where my morning class was assembling. One of our advanced students. Standard rules. Non-lethal force. Match ends at submission or incapacitation. If you would prefer to decline, we can arrange alternative assessment methods. I said it like it was a real option. It was not. No, Ria said, and something flickered across her face, gone too quickly for me to identify. I will accept the demonstration. Excellent, I said, leading her toward the training hall. I think Drenix will volunteer. He enjoys these welcoming exercises. Drenix was a cauldron, 8 feet of muscle and bone plating, with 4 arms like mine but twice as thick. He had won the Academy's combat championship 2 cycles running and had never lost a demonstration match. He was also arrogant, loud, and exactly the type to volunteer to pummel a newcomer in front of an audience. When we entered the hall, I caught Drenix's attention with a gesture. His eyes lit up when he saw Ria beside me. That is the human? He laughed, the sound booming across the training floor. Several other students turned to look. Instructor Velkrin, you cannot be serious. I will break her by accident just trying to grab her. Then I suggest you be careful, I said dryly. Administrator Horth would be very unhappy about diplomatic incidents. I volunteer, Drenix announced, stepping forward and flexing all 4 arms in what he probably thought was an impressive display. I will make this quick and educational. Ria looked up at him, her small face tilted back at an angle that must have strained her neck. She did not say anything, did not react. Just looked at him with those 2 large brown eyes. Well then, I said, activating the simulation field. Let us begin your education, Ria Chen. Try to learn something before Drenix puts you on the ground. I meant it kindly, in a harsh sort of way. I genuinely did not want to see the little human get seriously hurt on her first day. The simulation field hummed to life around them. a contained sphere of energy that would prevent any attacks from spilling out into the observation area. Standard safety protocol. What I did not know, what none of us knew, was that we were not the ones teaching the lesson that day. We were about to become students. The simulation field parameters displayed on the overhead screens for everyone to see. Standard non-lethal combat settings, which meant the field would prevent fatal strikes but allow everything else. Broken bones, dislocations, concussions, all fair game. Impact dampeners set to 20%, which was actually generous. Pain compliance holds were allowed. Strikes to any body part were permitted except direct spinal attacks. In other words, Drenix could beat her unconscious and it would be completely within the rules. Does the human understand the parameters? Quelix asked, her tone suggesting she hoped Rhea would back out. I understand, Rhea said quietly, stepping into the combat circle. She rolled her shoulders, a gesture I had seen countless fighters make before a match, and began some kind of stretching routine that looked bizarre on her two-legged frame. Drenix, meanwhile, was playing to the crowd. About 30 students had gathered around the observation area, word having spread quickly that the human was about to get demolished. He raised his arms, roared in that way cauldrons do when they want to intimidate prey, and slammed his fists together hard enough that the impact echoed through the hall. Try to last at least 30 seconds, little human, he called out. I have a reputation to maintain. Laughter rippled through the watching students. A few were placing bets on their data pads. I noticed the odds were running about 50-1 against Rhea lasting more than a minute. I activated the match timer. Begin when ready. Fight ends at submission, incapacitation, or instructor intervention. Drenix did not waste time. He charged forward immediately, closing the distance between himself and Rhea in 3 massive strides. His strategy was obvious. Overwhelm her with size and strength, grab her, throw her down, match over. It was exactly what I would have done against an opponent that small and apparently fragile. Rhea did not run, did not dodge. She shifted her weight slightly, turning her body at an angle, and watched him come. Drenix's first strike was a straight grab attempt with his upper right arm, meant to catch her shoulder and yank her off balance. It was fast, faster than most species could react to. His arm shot forward like a piston, and it connected. His hand clamped onto Rhea's shoulder, fingers wrapping around what had to be incredibly delicate bone structure. I actually winced, expecting to hear something snap. Drenix grinned, victorious, already pulling her toward him to set up a throw. That was when everything changed. Rhea did not scream, did not cry out, did not make any sound at all. She simply looked down at the hand on her shoulder, then back up at Drenix's face, and in that moment I saw something in her eyes that made my inner predator instincts suddenly wake up and pay attention. It was not fear, it was not pain, it was calculation. She moved. Her free hand came up, not frantically, not desperately, but with precise, controlled purpose. She grabbed Drenix's wrist with both of her small hands, stepped backward and downward simultaneously, and twisted her entire body in a motion that looked almost casual. Drenix's arm went with her. Had to. The joint mechanics did not give him a choice. His confident grin vanished, replaced by confusion, then alarm as his balance betrayed him. His massive body tilted forward, following the leverage she had created. She had just used his own strength against him. What, Quelix breathed beside me, was that? Drenix caught himself, stumbling but not falling, and yanked his arm free. He backed up 3 steps, reassessing. The crowd had gone quiet. Even the betting had stopped, data pads lowered as everyone watched. You are stronger than you look, human, Drenix said, and I could hear the edge in his voice. His pride was wounded. That made him dangerous. But strength is not enough. He attacked again, this time with all 4 arms, no longer playing around, no longer showing off. He came at her like the champion he was, strikes and grabs coming from multiple angles simultaneously. Rhea blocked 2 strikes, absorbed a third that caught her ribs. I heard the impact from where I stood, and rolled away from the 4th. She came up in a crouch, breathing hard, one hand pressed briefly to her side where the hit had landed. That should have cracked ribs.
Should have.
The impact force was enough to injure a Morphean, but Rhea just pressed her hand there for 1 second, 2 seconds, then stood up straight. No wincing, no crying out. She just took the pain, processed it, and dismissed it. The silence in the training hall was absolute now. Not shocked silence. Not yet, but anticipatory silence, the kind that happens when predators realize they might have misjudged their prey. Drenix stood opposite her, breathing heavily himself now, all four fists clenched. "Why will you not stay down?" Rhea did not answer. She did not smile, did not taunt, did not speak at all. She just settled into a fighting stance that looked nothing like any combat form I had ever seen, weight distributed in some strange way across her two legs, hands up but open, body angled, waiting. And in that moment, watching her stillness, her silence, her absolute lack of fear response, I realized something that sent ice through my veins. We had not scared her at all, we had not intimidated her. We had not taught her anything. We had just made her angry. Drenix circled right, trying to find an opening, trying to reassert dominance. He feinted with his lower left arm, a technique that usually drew defensive reactions he could exploit. Rhea did not react, did not flinch. She tracked his movement with her eyes, nothing else moving, conserving energy in a way that suddenly seemed less like weakness and more like efficiency. Then she attacked. Not wild, not desperate, calculated. She closed the distance herself this time, moving inside Drenix's reach before he could set up another four-armed combination. Her elbow, that strange joint in the middle of her arm, drove upward into his lower ribcage, right where the bone plating had a gap. The strike was precise, targeted, like she had studied cauldron anatomy and memorized the weak points. Drenix grunted, surprised, and swung downward with two arms simultaneously. She was already gone, sliding to his left side, and her leg, that single leg, swept behind his knee joint. Not hard enough to break anything, just hard enough to buckle it. He went down on one knee, off balance, and her fist, tiny compared to his, struck the nerve cluster on his neck. I taught that technique. I knew exactly how much it hurt. Drenix roared, more in rage than pain, and spun, one massive backhand coming around fast enough to blur. It caught Rhea across the chest and face, sent her flying backward a good 3 meters. She hit the simulation field boundary, the energy rippling where her body impacted, and dropped to the ground. "There," Drenix shouted, standing up, pointing at her crumpled form. "You see? Humans break like everything else." But she was getting up. Slowly, carefully, one hand braced against the field, she pushed herself to her feet. Blood ran from her nose, bright red, shockingly red against her skin. Her chest was heaving, ribs probably cracked from that hit. That backhand had enough force to kill smaller species outright. She wiped the blood from her face with the back of her hand, looked at it for a second, then looked back at Drenix. And she smiled. Actually smiled. Teeth showing, blood on her lips, and that expression said something that needed no translation. "Is that all you have?" "By the void," someone in the crowd whispered. "What is wrong with her?" Drenix charged again, and this time I could see the desperation in his attack pattern. He was not fighting tactically anymore. He was trying to prove something, to himself as much as to the watching crowd. His combinations came faster, harder, all four arms working in concert like I had trained him. Rhea met him head-on. She took another hit, this one to her shoulder, the impact audible, sickening, blocked a second strike, ducked under a third, and then she did something I had never seen in 17 cycles of teaching combat. She grabbed his upper right arm with both hands, planted her foot against his chest, and fell backward, pulling him with her. As her back hit the ground, her other leg came up, foot pressing into his midsection, and she used his own momentum to throw him over her head. The move had a name in human combat systems. I would learn later. They called it Atama no Jei. We called it impossible. The strength-to-weight ratio should not have worked. The leverage was all wrong for someone her size. But Drenix flew through the air and crashed into the simulation field behind her. 8 feet of cauldron warrior tossed like a training dummy. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, in confused, alarmed chatter. I heard several students calling for me to stop the match. Quelix's tail was thrashing in agitation beside me, her species fear response activating. Drenix lay there for 3 full seconds, stunned, his brain trying to process what had just happened. Rhea rolled to her feet slower this time, clearly hurt, clearly exhausted, but still moving. "Stay down," she said quietly. Her first words since the match began. "Please." That please. That tiny word somehow made it worse. She was not taunting him. She was genuinely asking him to stop so she would not have to hurt him more. Drenix's pride could not accept that. He roared. Actually roared in berserker rage, and launched himself at her one final time, technique abandoned, just pure fury and muscle. Rhea sidestepped, her hand chopped into his throat, not hard enough to crush, but hard enough to stop his breathing for a critical second. As he stumbled past her gasping, she grabbed his arm, the same arm that had hit her earlier, stepped in close to his body, and did something to his elbow joint. The crack echoed through the training hall. Drenix screamed. Actually screamed. His arm bent at an angle arms were not meant to bend, and he dropped to his knees, cradling the joint, his other three arms useless because his brain was overloaded with pain signals. Rhea stood over him, breathing hard, bleeding from her nose and mouth, her jumpsuit torn, her body clearly damaged, but standing, still standing. I said, "Please," she whispered. Then she looked up at me, at Quelix, at the crowd of students who had gone absolutely silent again, this time in genuine shock. "Is the demonstration over?" she asked calmly, like she had just completed a routine exercise. "Or do you need me to continue?" My mouth was dry. My 4 hearts were beating irregular patterns. Every instinct I had was screaming at me that I had just witnessed something fundamentally wrong with my understanding of the universe. This small, fragile-looking creature from a garden world had just demolished our champion, had taken punishment that should have crippled her, had fought through pain that would have stopped any rational being. "Medical team," I finally managed to say into my communicator. "Training Hall 1. Now." Quelix slithered forward, stopping well short of Rhea, maintaining distance. "How?" she asked simply. "How are you still standing?" Rhea wiped more blood from her face, winced, then shrugged with one shoulder, the other clearly injured. "You hit me once," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I grew up on Earth. On Earth, everything hits harder than that." She swayed slightly, her body finally acknowledging the damage, and I moved forward quickly to catch her before she fell. Her weight was nothing in my arms, light as a child, but those eyes looking up at me were not a child's eyes. They were the eyes of something that had climbed to the top of a food chain we could not even comprehend. "I think," Rhea said softly, consciousness starting to fade, "I passed your assessment." Then she was out, her body going limp, finally allowing itself to rest after doing the impossible. I stood there, holding an unconscious human, while around me the entire academy tried to process what they had just witnessed. Drenix was still on the ground, whimpering, his arm at that terrible angle. Our champion, our best fighter, broken by a creature half his size from a species we had dismissed as weak. The demonstration was over. The lesson, however, was just beginning. The medical team arrived in 45 seconds, which was actually impressive given that they had to come from 3 levels down, 2 Valorian medics with their standard emergency kits, followed by a Porphylian doctor whose name I could never remember, but who had stitched up half the academy at one point or another. They rushed to Drenix first, naturally, since he was the one screaming. One medic knelt beside him, scanning his arm with a portable diagnostic unit while the other prepared a pain-suppressant injector. "Compound fracture of the primary elbow joint," the first medic announced, her crystalline voice chiming with clinical detachment. "Severe ligament damage. Extensive bruising across the rib cage and neck area. He will need surgical reconstruction." "What about the human?" the doctor asked, looking at Rhea's limp form in my arms. "Scanning now," the second medic said, moving his device over her body. The readings appeared on his display, and I watched his expression shift from routine concern to complete confusion. "This cannot be right." "What?" I asked, adjusting my grip to hold Rhea more carefully. She felt like she might break if I squeezed too hard, but apparently that was misleading. 3 cracked ribs, the medic read off his scanner. Fractured left cheekbone. Severe bruising across 40% of her body surface. Dislocated shoulder. Concussion grade 2. Nasal fracture. And she was still fighting. "She was winning," Quelix corrected quietly. The medic looked up at me, then at Quelix, then back at his scanner like it had personally offended him. "Her pain threshold readings are, I do not even have a comparison. Her body is releasing chemical compounds I have never seen before. Her cardiovascular system is working at triple normal capacity." "What is this species?" "Human," I said. From Earth. Where is Earth classified? The doctor asked, pulling out his own medical database. I need to understand her physiology before I treat her. I did not know. I should have known. I should have checked before allowing this demonstration, before putting her in the ring with Drenix, before assuming she was just another soft species playing at being warriors. I will look it up, Quelix said, her datapad already out, searching through the galactic registry. The medics carefully took Rhea from my arms, placing her on an anti-gravity stretcher. Drenix was loaded onto another, still conscious, still whimpering, his pride shattered along with his arm. As they prepared to transport both fighters to the medical bay, Quelix made a sound I had never heard her make before. A hiss of genuine alarm. Velcrin, she said slowly, her eyes fixed on her datapad screen. Earth is not classified as a garden world. What? I moved to look over her shoulder at the display. It is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. The training hall, already quiet, somehow became quieter. Class 12? That was the same classification as Cauldron Prime, Drenix's home world. The same classification as Threxia, my home world. Worlds where the gravity was crushing, where the predators hunted in packs, where the weather itself tried to kill you, where survival was a daily battle against an environment that wanted you dead. That cannot be correct, I said. But even as I spoke, pieces were falling into place. The pain tolerance, the tactical adaptability, the absolute refusal to quit. These were not learned behaviors. These were evolutionary necessities. There is more, Quelix continued, scrolling through the data. Earth's atmospheric oxygen content is 21%. That is higher than most civilized worlds. Their gravity is 98% of galactic standard. Their planet is 70% covered in a corrosive solvent that would kill most species. They have predators on every continent. Their weather includes electrical storms, rotational wind systems that destroy entire settlements, frozen precipitation that can bury structures in minutes. Stop, I said, but she continued. They have active tectonic plates, volcanic activity, radiation from their sun that would cause cancer in most species without protection. Their own star occasionally releases electromagnetic pulses that can disable technology, and they evolved there. They adapted to all of that. They became the apex predators on a planet that has thousands of apex predators. I looked at Rhea's unconscious form on the stretcher, at the blood still drying on her face, at the injuries that should have ended her but had only slowed her down. How many humans are there? Someone in the crowd asked. Quelix checked. Approximately 8 billion on their homeworld alone. Another 2 billion scattered across colony worlds and stations. 8 billion. 8 billion creatures like this, forged in an environment that made Cauldron Prime look hospitable. 8 billion survivors of a planet that tried to kill them every single day and failed. The doctor cleared his throat. I need to get them both to medical. The human's injuries are extensive, but her biology is already beginning self-repair. I have never seen regeneration rates like this outside of specialized species. She will likely be conscious again within hours. And Drenix? I asked. Surgery within the hour. Recovery time, 3 to 4 weeks. Psychological counseling, recommended. The doctor paused, then added with what might have been sympathy. He just lost to a species he had never heard of, in front of his peers, in a fight he thought was meant to be a joke. His ego may take longer to heal than his arm. They moved both stretchers toward the exit, the anti-gravity units humming softly. As they passed through the doorway, I heard Drenix moan something that sounded like Hal, repeated over and over. I could not answer that question. None of us could. The crowd of students remained frozen, watching the medical team leave, processing what they had witnessed. No one was talking. No one was placing bets. No one was laughing or boasting. Finally, a young Morphean student in the back raised his hand, his voice shaking slightly. Instructor Velcrin, are all humans like that? I thought about lying, thought about telling them Rhea was special, exceptional, a statistical anomaly. But Quelix had just read out the data. 8 billion of them. 8 billion survivors of a death world where the strong lived and the weak died, and nature itself was the harshest instructor imaginable. I do not know, I admitted, my voice carrying across the hall, but I intend to find out. Class dismissed. Go to your quarters. Think about what you just saw. We will resume normal training tomorrow. They filed out slowly, quietly, None of the usual post-combat chatter or analysis. They looked shaken, which was appropriate because I felt the same way. When the hall was empty except for Quelix and myself, she turned to me with all four eyes focused. We made assumptions. We did, I agreed. We thought she was prey. We did. She is not prey, Valkyrin. Prey does not smile when it bleeds. Prey does not ask its attacker to stay down. Prey does not come from a planet where it has to fight to see the next sunrise. I looked at the combat circle, at the scuff marks from the fight, at the small drops of red human blood on the training mat. No, I said quietly, she is not prey. None of them are. We just never bothered to ask what kind of world builds a species like that. The simulation field powered down with a final hum, and the training hall fell into darkness except for the emergency lighting strips along the walls. Somewhere in the medical bay, a human named Ria Chen was being treated for injuries that would have killed weaker species, injuries she had accepted as the cost of teaching us a lesson we desperately needed to learn. We had hit her once. Just once. At the beginning of the fight, when Drenix thought he had won before it even started. She had responded with silence, with calculation, with a violence so controlled and purposeful that it made our champion look like an amateur. And now we knew. Now we all knew. Humans did not need to be loud to be dangerous. They did not need to be large to be lethal. They just needed to be what their terrible, beautiful, deadly planet had made them. Survivors. I did not sleep that night. Could not. I sat in my quarters with every screen active, pulling up every piece of data I could find on Earth, on humans, on the species we had so casually dismissed. The more I read, the worse it got. Humans had evolved as pursuit predators. They did not have the speed of a Morphean or the strength of a Cauldron, so instead they developed something more terrifying. Endurance. They could run their prey to exhaustion, chasing animals for hours, sometimes days, until the target simply collapsed from exhaustion and overheating. They called it persistence hunting, and it sounded like something from a horror story. Their bones were dense, calcium-based structures that could take incredible impacts and heal themselves. Their skin, that fragile-looking covering, was actually layered with pain receptors, so sensitive they could detect a single hair moving, giving them tactical awareness we needed technology to match. They had binocular vision with exceptional depth perception, forward-facing eyes like predators, not prey. And their brains. Oh, their brains. Humans had evolved problem-solving intelligence specifically to kill things more efficiently. Tool creation, fire manipulation, tactical coordination, all of it developed so they could hunt bigger, stronger, faster prey and win. They were not strong, so they made weapons. They were not armored, so they made armor. They were not the biggest or the fastest, so they became the smartest, the most adaptable, the most stubborn. A knock on my door interrupted my research spiral. I opened it to find Quelix and 3 other instructors, Morthak, Telina, and Vex, all looking as disturbed as I felt. "You are researching humans," Quelix said. Not a question. "I am," I admitted, gesturing them inside. "Please tell me I am overreacting. Tell me today was an anomaly." "I wish I could," Morthak rumbled, his stone-like features somehow managing to look worried. "I have been reviewing combat footage from Earth's history. Valkyrin, they fight each other. Constantly. For thousands of cycles they have been perfecting ways to kill other humans. Their entire military science is built on fighting themselves. They have a concept called mutually assured destruction," Telina added, her wings fluttering with agitation. "They built weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, aimed them at each other, and then just decided not to use them. They lived with that threat hanging over them for decades." "That is insane," Vex said flatly. "That is human," I corrected. "They evolved in an environment so hostile that they had to become more dangerous than everything trying to kill them, including each other." Another knock. This time it was Administrator Horth, and he looked significantly less cheerful than yesterday. His face sacs were deflated, his breathing apparatus working overtime. "Valkyrin, we need to talk about the human situation," he wheezed, squeezing into my already crowded quarters. "The human situation," I repeated. "You mean the Deathworlder you approved as an exchange student without bothering to check her planet's classification?" Horth's sacs inflated slightly, indignant. "The diplomatic committee assured me humans were peaceful, technologically advanced, suitable for integration into galactic society." "They are peaceful," Quelix said, "because they choose to be, not because they have to be. There is a difference." "Administrator, A significant difference. I have been contacted by 5 different ambassadors in the past 3 hours, Orth continued, ignoring her point. News of today's demonstration has spread. Some species are concerned. Others are interested. Very interested. The Drexian Empire wants to know if humans are available for military contracts. Absolutely not, I said immediately. I agree, Orth said, surprising me. Which is why I need your assessment, Velkrin. Professional opinion. Are humans a threat to station security? I thought about Rhea, small and bleeding and smiling. I thought about her asking Drenix to stay down, giving him an out, showing mercy even when she was winning. No, I said carefully. Not unless we make them one. Rhea could have killed Drenix at least 3 times during that match. She chose not to. She controlled her violence, used exactly enough force to win and not a drop more. That level of restraint is not weakness. Administrator. It is discipline. Then what do you recommend? Orth asked. We treat her like we would treat any Deathworld species, I said. With respect. With caution. And we learn from her. Because I guarantee she has more to teach us than we have to teach her. The other students, Morthak said slowly, are afraid. They watch Drenix, our best fighter, get dismantled by someone a third his size. Morale is problematic. Good, I said, and everyone looked at me in surprise. Let them be afraid. Fear breeds respect. Respect breeds caution. Caution keeps people alive. They needed to learn that size is not everything, that assumptions can be fatal. Better they learn it here in a controlled environment than in actual combat where the lesson comes with a body count. Krelix's tail swished in agreement. Velkrin is right. This was a valuable lesson, even if it was not the lesson we intended to teach. What about Drenix? Talina asked. He is in surgery now, but when he recovers, his reputation is destroyed. He may not be able to continue training here. Then he learns humility. I said without sympathy. He underestimated an opponent and paid the price. That is exactly what would happen in real combat, except there he would be dead instead of embarrassed. Orth sighed, his breathing apparatus rattling. Very well. The human stays. But Velkrin, you are now her primary instructor. Keep her safe. Keep the other students safe, and for the sake of galactic relations, try not to have any more demonstrations that end with our champions in the medical bay. Understood, I said. They filed out, leaving me alone with my screens and my research and my completely shattered understanding of how the universe worked. Somewhere in the medical bay, Rhea Chen was sleeping off injuries that should have taken weeks to heal. By morning, according to the doctor's latest report, she would be awake, mobile, and ready to continue training. Because she was human, and humans did not stay down. They never stayed down. That was what their entire planet had taught them, written into their bones and blood and stubborn, incredible will to survive. We had hit her once, expecting her to break. Instead, she had shown us exactly what it meant to come from a world where breaking was not an option. I finally understood why the galaxy should be very, very grateful that humans had chosen peace. Because if they ever chose war, the rest of us would not stand a chance. Rhea returned to training 3 days later. 3 days. The doctor had predicted a week minimum, possibly 2. Human biology, apparently, had other ideas. She walked into the training hall with her ribs taped, a healing patch on her cheek, and her left arm in a support brace. The entire morning class went silent, 50 students representing 20 different species, all staring at the small human who had rewritten everything they thought they knew about combat. I had not planned a speech, had not prepared anything formal, but everyone was looking at me, waiting for guidance, for context, for someone to explain what happened and what it meant. Before I could speak, Rhea raised her good hand. Yes? I said, curious. May I say something, instructor? Her voice was steady, clear, no trace of pain or hesitation. Please, I gestured for her to continue. She turned to face the assembled students, this tiny figure surrounded by beings 2 or 3 times her size. I did not come here to prove anything, she said simply. I came here to learn. What happened with Drenix, that was not personal. That was just what I know, what Earth taught me. Where I come from, you fight or you die. So we learn to fight, all of us. Every human. It is not special, it is just survival. She paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with students who immediately looked away. I hope we can train together, she continued. I hope we can learn from each other. because I think you have techniques and skills that could make me better, and maybe I have things that could help you too, if you are willing." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, a Morphean student in the third row raised his hand. Could you teach us that throwing technique? The one you used on Drenix?" Rhea smiled, and this time it was not the bloody, terrifying smile from the fight. It was genuine, warm, almost relieved. "I would be happy to." Just like that, the tension broke. Questions started coming from all directions. How did she take that hit to the ribs? What was that nerve strike technique? Where did she learn to use leverage like that? Could humans really chase prey for days? I watched her answer each question with patience and humility, this Deathworld predator teaching the galaxy's warriors that maybe, just maybe, they still had things to learn. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Students started requesting mixed-species sparring partners instead of sticking to their own kind. Instructors revised combat curricula to include human techniques. The Academy's combat philosophy, built on centuries of assumption and tradition, began adapting to accommodate the lessons one small human had taught us. Drenix eventually returned to training. He never spoke about the match, but I noticed he started studying human combat footage obsessively. His arrogance had been replaced with something more valuable: humility and a genuine desire to improve. As for me, I stopped making assumptions about species I did not understand. I stopped judging capability by size or appearance. I stopped thinking I knew everything about combat just because I had taught it for 17 cycles. Rhea taught me that, taught all of us that. And the galaxy, slowly, carefully, began to understand that humans were not weak, not soft, not prey. They were survivors from a world that tried to kill them every single day. And they had smiled, and adapted, and conquered it anyway. So yes, we hit the Deathworld girl once, right at the start when we thought we were teaching her a lesson. Turns out she was the teacher all along. Funny how the universe works like that, is it not? Hilarious, actually. Absolutely hilarious.